the first half of the season has already come and gone, and I think despite the Giants' 47-50 record, their position player group is or has been a lot better than people think.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015. I've been hosting this show for over 5 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And coming up on today's show, we're not going to spend much time talking about the All-Star game because it was not a great one for the Giants. Logan Webb gave up 3 runs in his 1 inning of work. Heliot Ramos had 1 at-bat and struck out. And 1 at-bat that I saw, and then I was like, you know what, I can't do this anymore. But I think he was just 0 for 1 with a strikeout. Yes, 0 for 1 with a strikeout. And so we won't spend too much time. Obviously disappointing for Webb, especially to give up 3 runs. The National League had a 3-0 lead at the time. But what I want to, instead of harping on that, because there's really no point, the game is meaningless. It's just an exhibition. Thank goodness they got rid of that stupid rule that made it determine home field advantage in the All-Star or in the World Series. That was insane. But I want to review the first half on the position player side, not really getting into the defense because I want to lump that together with pitching. Kind of run scoring and run prevention is where I want to look. And this was pointed out to me on Twitter like just now today by Felix, who said in response to something I had written about how I thought Patrick Bailey deserved more all-star recognition, and I was a little surprised there wasn't more of a discourse about Patrick Bailey. Like even NBC Sports Bay Area, they like put out a poll about who else besides Webb and Ramos do you think is deserving of going to the All-Star game? And the people they put on the list were like Matt Chapman, somebody else, and then Taylor Rogers and Tyler Rogers. So whoever made that poll, just completely ignoring Bailey, is tripping. I'm sorry to say, but tripping. No offense, if you made that and you're listening to this, Patrick Bailey is having, an all-star caliber first half for sure. And significantly, when I put out this tweet just a few days ago, I mentioned that he was 3rd in Major League Baseball among catchers in Fangraphs wins above replacement. But Felix pointed out to me that Fangraphs seem to have made an update on, I don't know if it was site-wide for defense or if it was just catcher defense or what, but Bailey's Fangraphs wins above replacement jumped up by a whole win from 2.6 to 3.5. And Felix says, I guess they fixed his framing FRM, and he now leads all catchers in MLB in FWAR, defensive run saved, and FRM framing. And he is like the premier framer in the game. And so that's a huge jump. And so now if you look at the season totals for the Giants, it didn't bump them up too much, but their defensive numbers kind of overall as a team went significantly up because of this. Because catcher is such a critical offensive position. People do complain about his ball blocking sometimes. I go on a soapbox about how ball blocking is not the most, like framing is much more impactful. And so is kind of your ability to throw out runners. That's even mostly framing, but ball blocking is kind of the least significant in terms of the impact it has on run prevention thing of all the things that a catcher does. Anyway, so that's worth pointing out that there was a major change there. And so overall, I'll just, tell you what is the league average and where the Giants are, and then we'll get into individual players and the standouts in a good way, in good ways and in bad ways. But the major league average slash line is a 243 batting average, a 312 slugging, and a 312 on base, and a 397 slugging. And that's not very good. I mean, that's the thing, is we have to realize that offense is just kind of not great in Major League Baseball. It's hard to hit is the key there. I mean, the Major League batting average 30 years ago was like way higher than it is now. It's 243 now. So if you're hitting 245, guess what? You're above average. If you're hitting 244, above average in terms of batting average. So with that in mind, the Giants come in with a batting average of 244, so 1 point above Major League average. The Major League average on base percentage is 312, and the Giants come in with an on base percentage of 315. So far 2 for 2 in being a little bit above average. And the Major League average slugging percentage is 397, and the Giants come in at 391, so a little bit below average in that category. But the Giants get a little bit of credit for playing half their games at Oracle Park, and so their weighted runs created plus as a team is 103, which means 3% above average overall when adjusting for park factors, essentially. The Giants' strikeout rate is kind of right in the middle. It's 22%. The Major League average is 22.3. So they're striking out slightly less than at a rate that's slightly less than the Major League average rate. Giants' walk rate as a team is ninth highest in Major League Baseball at 8.7%. The Major League average walk rate is 8.2%. Now, it is worth noting that in terms of steals, Giants are dead last with 31. The next closest team is the Yankees with 38. Worth pointing out, the Yankees have a very good record. A lot of these teams in the bottom have a good record. The Yankees are 29th in stolen bases. The Braves are 27th in stolen bases. The Twins have a good record. They're 25th in stolen bases. And, some of the teams near the top, like the Nationals, are third and they don't have a good record. The Angels are 7th and they have a very bad record. So there's not a huge correlation between stolen bases and like winning percentage based on just glancing at this. And I don't know, in terms of home runs, Giants rank 24th. So that's definitely been a deficiency for them. I did mention that out of average and on base and slugging was the only number that was below average out of those three. And then isolated power is kind of a better measure of power than just slugging percentage, because slugging percentage is influenced by batting average. Isolated power, like it literally means it's isolating just the power component of slugging by subtracting batting average. And so the number there for the Giants ranks 21st at 146, and the Major League average is 154. So it's not like horribly below average, but it is below average. So if there's one thing to really kind of complain about, it would be that there's not, the batting average, the on base percentage are kind of just a little bit above average, and the slugging is a little below average. In terms of batting average on balls in play, Giants are at 293. The Major League average is 289, so they're a little bit above average in that department. Not necessarily a luck thing. Some players just have especially faster players, and the Giants have started incorporating faster players onto their roster. Guys like Heliot Ramos, just historically, if you look at his minor league numbers, you look at projections, he runs high batting averages on balls in play. It's not always about being fast. It could just be that's just the kind of player you are, but it also can fluctuate from year to year. So lastly, in terms of just pure base running, this is a metric that Fangraphs puts out called BSR, base running, and it's like a better thing to look at than just, how many steals do you have? Because there's more to base running than just steals. There's going first to third, second to home, first to home, not getting thrown out on the bases, getting thrown out on the bases. Giants at minus 2.2 runs above average. So a little bit below average, coming in at 19th. So, Major League average would be 0, and Giants base running has cost them 2 runs. And so the being dead last in steals, it doesn't really make much of an impact there, according to this metric, because there's more to base running than just are you stealing bases or not. Giants, I would imagine, and we can look at this in a second, but they're also probably not getting thrown out very often on the bases when they're attempting to steal, which that would be a whole different thing. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, what you've been waiting for. We're going to get into the individual players, a lot of pleasant surprises, and also some disappointments. So we'll get into all of that coming up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by our good friends over at Supply House. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining supplyhouse.com's free Trademaster program. Every Trademaster gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. Today's episode is also brought to you in part by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members, yours truly included. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can if you're looking for promotions, Prize Picks has you covered every week, from lowering select players' stat projections on Tuesdays to help your lineup hit, or getting your entry fees back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays. And this is something I've taken advantage of a couple of times and, in fact, hit because of it. Prize Picks is also available in more than 30 states across the country, yes, including California, Texas, and Georgia as well. So, download the Prize Picks app today. Use code all lowercase LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, here we go. We are going to get into the individual performers behind the Giants' slightly above average offensive output. And again, we're not getting really into defense, even though I did talk about Patrick Bailey, and but we are going to talk about something like wins above replacement for players, kind of hinting at their defense without getting too much into the specifics. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, coming up tomorrow, we are going to talk pitching and defense, run prevention, and how it's actually been, I think, contrary to popular belief each and every year, it's almost like we just assume the Giants are good at preventing runs no matter what, because they have been historically at times, especially when they've been successful. But really, it's been more of the problem than hitting, and we'll break that down tomorrow in detail. So getting into the details on the position players, actually, first I have to tell you that are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, and do you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. We don't scream here. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Also, a reminder, you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM. Just download the SXM app and search the word Giants. So, in terms of the leaders in Fangraphs wins above replacement. And by the way, Fangraphs is the place to go for wins above replacement, especially for catchers, because they incorporate framing into their wins above. Like, other sites aren't doing that. And so if you look at Buster Posey and other players, like, you're going to see a huge difference from Baseball Reference WAR to like Fangraphs WAR. And it's because Fangraphs is basically better at like incorporating catcher defense into that number. So I really have to look this up because Bailey's now going to be among the leaders in baseball in wins above replacement. I mean, he's at, it's stupid that they make it you have to be qualified. This is not, it's like home runs. You don't need to be a qualified hitter to be a leader. Like, if you have the most home runs and you're not qualified, that would be the stupidest thing ever to just say, oh, they don't count. It means you have fewer plate appearances than everybody else. So, of course, anyway, I digress. Patrick Bailey is 14th in Major League Baseball at 3.5. Now it says 3.5. Didn't I say 3.4 earlier? Whatever. Tied with Mookie Betts in about the same number of games, but far fewer plate appearances is Patrick Bailey. And a big part of that is defense. So, yes, he leads the Giants now with this update. He was kind of in a dead heat with like Matt Chapman and Heliot Ramos. So, Bailey, I've talked about this. I tweeted about it quietly, hitting and like legitimately hitting. Like I mentioned the league average batting average is 243. Bailey's batting average is 283. So 40 points above average. Out of the catcher position. It'd be one thing if he was like a first baseman, right? But this is the most premium defensive position, and he does a premium job at it, and he's hitting. That is the recipe for, I mean, if at this kind of pace, that's like over 140 games, like a 7 WAR pace, which is like MVP caliber performance. And so the fact that he wasn't even really thought of as an all-star is kind of baffling, but he's doing it. He's not striking out as much as last year at all, like 10 points down from like 30% to 20%. His walk rate is up to almost 11%. So Bailey is just looking like a stud, and that is great. And we talked yesterday about how the Giants have had more success recently with drafting and developing and seeing some of the fruits of their draft picks. It's not that they've had more success. It's that with time, we've started to see some of the guys they've drafted come up and actually succeed. It was forever before the Giants had a player like Bailey come up and just make the kind of impact he's made. And so he ranks first and has been just invaluable to this team. Matt Chapman comes in at number 2 with 2.4. He's tied with Heliot Ramos, but has played 34 more games than Ramos. So really, the performance has been better from Ramos. It's just Chapman has accrued more playing time. So I'm going to talk about Ramos. I mean, he's been probably the best story. I would say I would now kind of put Bailey up in that category as his development is such an enormous deal for this team. But Heliot Ramos's breakout has also been an enormous development for this team. He was an all-star. He's kind of struggled the last few games. They've started throwing him high fastballs, like just above the zone, and he's swinging and missing a lot at them. And so that he needs to like make an adjustment there, probably just not swing because he's not doing anything with those pitches. But nonetheless, an all-star first half out of nowhere for Heliot Ramos, former top prospect, former number 19 overall pick in 2017. Just having a very nice season, hitting 298 with a 365 on base, 523 slugging. It's a 226 isolated power. Strikeout rate is kind of high at 27%. Weighted runs created plus is 150, which is, 50% better than average, which is just amazing, but it's still a small sample. It's only 60 games, so he still has something to prove, in my opinion. Like, I still want to see how everything looks when the dust settles and he's played, 120, 130 games. Like, let him do this. I want to see how the next 60 games look for Heliot Ramos. And if he can keep it up, then that's very exciting. But I think it's still evaluation time. He leads the team in homers despite playing, he's got 14 homers and Matt Chapman has 13. But again, Chapman has played 34 more games, almost 50% more games than Ramos. And, Jorge Soler, who we're going to get into when we talk about the disappointments on the team, has 10 homers in 82 games. And again, Ramos 14 in 60. So that's been great. And LaMonte Wade Jr. was on his way to having an all-star first half before he hurt his hamstring. He's hitting 311, 438 on base, 419 slugging in 210 plate appearances. If we set the minimum to 200 plate appearances, we probably set it to 210. No, yeah, we can. Let's just set it to 210 and look at the leaders in on-base percentage in Major League Baseball. Numero uno, LaMonte Wade Jr. at 438. Numero dos is Aaron Judge, and number 3 is Juan Soto. So that's the kind of on-base production we're talking about. Granted, Soto and Judge have done it in like double the plate appearances and not getting platooned. So, and, playing a more premium positions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not saying Wade is Judge or Soto, but that's how good he's number one in the sport, 210 plate appearances or more in on-base percentage, and that's nothing to scoff at. And another guy who's kind of quietly done a nice job is Mike Yastrzemski, who was hot to end the first half and comes in just after Bailey, Chapman, Ramos, and Wade as the 5th best player on the Giants. This is a guy people perpetually want cut from the team. But as I said the other day, he now has a 114 weighted runs created plus 14% above average offense. And guess what his career weighted runs created plus is? 114. So he's right in line with his career norms. And you might look at the numbers and be like, that's disappointing. 241 average, you might think that's horrible, but it's just below average. And the on base is about average, and the slugging and the isolated power are above average. So Yastrzemski, when he gets hits, they're often extra base hits, and he runs the bases well, and he plays really good corner outfield defense, and he can play center. So he's been, I wouldn't say like a super enormous bright spot, but at the same time, he started out poorly and he's kind of done a nice job to rebound. And there are other players as well who are having nice rebound seasons, and some young players too, and some injuries. And so we'll get into the rest of the players on the position player side on the Giants coming up in just a minute. And before we do, today's episode is brought to you in part by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, which I have personally bought on eBay Motors, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, here we go. We are going to get into the rest of the position players on the Giants. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every day is tomorrow. Pitching and defense. And there's going to be less positive things. Well, it's more like there's positives. There's like extreme positives, maybe not extreme, but strong positives and strong negatives on the pitching side, but also optimism because of the health and returning players. So a lot to get into there tomorrow, and we'll also go into a detailed look at defense. We'll break down what's going on with the Patrick Bailey defense thing as well. But I mentioned the top 5 players on the Giants. How about Tyler Fitzgerald and Brett Wisely coming in both in the top 10 in wins above replacement on the Giants? Fangraphs wins above replacement. Tyler Fitzgerald with a 121 weighted runs created plus, playing center field, shortstop, basically anywhere they want him or ask him to play. He's been their best base runner, like almost as valuable as almost as many runs above average as Chapman at around 2, but in 35 games versus 94 for Chapman. And the thing about Fitzgerald, he struck out almost a third of the time, 32.6%. His average on balls in play is 408, which is unsustainably high. By the way, LaMonte Wade Jr.'s is 405, which is also unsustainably high. Ramos's is high at 371. So there's a lot of players whose batting average on balls in play is going to come down, but hopefully some guys, theirs is going to come up. Like, man, when I look at Wilmer Flores, we'll talk about him later, later on, like in just a couple minutes. But yeah, so a shout out to Fitzgerald, but I do expect some regression there. But also I've seen a lot of positives, seen some power in the bat, a lot of speed and versatility, and just looks like a major leaguer to me. And Brett Wisely, want to give a shout out to what he's been able to do, hitting 279, 314 on base, 422 slugging, playing shortstop, playing mostly infield this year. He played some center last year, but I think it's just been infield this year. But filling in at the shortstop position when they needed it, Nick Ahmed went down, Marco Luciano got sent down, and so it was Wisely for a long time. And even when Ahmed came back, Wisely with his new swing, new stance, has kind of secured a role, but the numbers have fallen quite a bit. Only a 109 weighted runs created plus now, and the expected numbers are worse than the actual numbers. And so it's going to be very interesting to see. And they kind of mentioned the DFA of Nick Ahmed as partially to give it's a vote of confidence in Wisely and Fitzgerald, but also we want to see what we have in Wisely and Fitzgerald and see if we need to make a move at the trading deadline, which is 2 weeks away. And so there's that. I want to mention Michael Conforto has been, better with the bat. He's been streaky. He's hit for a lot of power. I know it doesn't show up in the home run total, but a 201 isolated power is, among regulars on the Giants, second to just Heliot Ramos. And overall, 237 average, 310 on base, but a 438 slugging, so a 112 weighted runs created plus, and expected numbers that are better by quite a bit than the actual numbers. And that's true for Chapman too, with expected numbers much better than the actual numbers offensively. Problem for Conforto is he hasn't graded out well defensively, so overall hasn't graded out well as a great player. Of course, they lost Jung Hoo Lee for the season after just 37 games with the shoulder dislocation. I forget exactly what they dubbed it, what it's called, the exact injury, but out for the season. And that was a big blow that doesn't get talked about much when it comes to their performance this year. Heliot Ramos has done a nice job making that blow a little bit softer. So getting into the disappointments, Jorge Soler, I think, has been a pretty significant disappointment. They're paying him to hit, and he's barely hitting. He's just DHing. He's played 82 games, and he's hitting just 225. Remember, league average is 243. His on-base percentage is just 305, which is below, I think it was 311 was major league average. And his slugging is 397. Isolated power is 172. So he's just been barely above average offensively by weighted runs created plus. He's striking out a lot. I think in the last game they played, he struck out every time. So he's been a fairly significant disappointment. And he's done this at times in his career where he's been bad, and then like the next year he's been an absolute monster. I mean, this is a guy who had 48 home runs a few years ago, and he's got 10 after 82 games. So he's on pace for like less than 20, and he hit 48 like not that long ago. So yeah, pretty significant disappointment. And then we get to, Austin Slater was a big disappointment, and they traded him, and then they ended up losing the player they got in return off waivers. So they basically just cut Austin Slater essentially in terms of this trade. So that was a sad, unceremonious end for his Giants tenure. He had been the longest tenured Giant. A lot of young players not getting a lot of opportunities for, I don't want to say whatever reason. There are reasons I could explain for every guy, but like none of them have really. Marco Luciano had major defensive problems when he was up, but he did hit. Casey Schmidt was up a little bit, only 12 games, 10 for Luciano. Sable was good in 11 games when needed, and David Villar 6 games played and hit pretty well, and it had some big hits in those 6 games. And after that, Tom Murphy, the catcher they signed to be the backup to Bailey, had a pretty significant injury after just 13 games. And so Kurt Casale has done a pretty nice job filling in as the backup catcher, but they're always better when it's Bailey back there. And then Luis Matos had that unbelievable stretch where he was the player of the week and record-setting like RBI numbers over a course of however many games. And then he's completely fallen off to the point where he comes in with negative -0.5 Fangraphs wins above replacement, last on the team, tied for last with both Tom Murphy and Wilmer Flores, and just below average numbers across the board for Matos despite that torrid stretch. And then lastly, yes, Wilmer Flores, who was the best hitter on the Giants, a real monster with the bat last year. Not at all the case so far this year, with just a 205 average, 277 on base, 314 slugging, about 30% below average. And yeah, the average on balls in play for Flores is just 219. And so I would expect that to climb up significantly. And for Matos, it's just 230. And I would expect that to climb up significantly as well. Interestingly, both players have really below average strikeout rates. Like they don't strike out at all. I mean, not at all, but they're really low strikeout rates. And so these are guys you would expect to be doing better than they're doing offensively. And maybe in the second half, they can do that. And injuries have certainly played a part. Like for Wilmer Flores, at least, as an example, he has recently gone on the injured list with a knee issue. So anyway, that sums up the position player group from kind of a overall / hitting perspective. And coming up tomorrow, again, everydayers will be getting into the pitching and defense side of things and how that's been more of the issue, despite, some big names like Logan Webb. I mean, otherwise there's been quite like Blake Snell, Camilo Doval, and lots of others. It's been like big names, but not big performance, except recently for Snell. Anyway, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.